A 20-year-old student disappeared on her way home from visiting her boyfriend, and at first, the investigation seemed almost impossible to solve. But after some time, the police realized something unsettling. The answer had been right in front of them the whole time. Kara Knott was born in San Diego, California, on February 11, 1966, into a family of 4 children. They lived in a suburban neighborhood of San Diego called El Cajon, known for its quiet streets and close-knit community. Kara was an optimistic, ambitious young woman with a bright future ahead. After graduating from high school, Kara decided to pursue a career in teaching. She enrolled at the University of San Diego. She decided to stay with her parents at home and commute about 20 minutes to campus. As she turned 20, Kara received a special gift from her father, an old white Volkswagen Beetle, a car she had dreamed of owning for years. She worked part-time at a local zoo, using her earnings to donate to help injured animals. In addition to her job at the zoo, Kara also worked at a small health food store, balancing her responsibilities with her studies and work. Her life seemed to be going smoothly, and she had every reason to be hopeful about the future. She spent the New Year's holidays surrounded by her family and friends, enjoying the holiday season. Kara also made frequent visits to her boyfriend Wayne, who lived about 30 miles away in the town of Candida. Everything seemed normal, and her plans for the future were very optimistic. But that would change on the evening of December 27, 1986. On that day, Kara had made plans to visit Wayne, who had been sick and needed her care. She spent the day at his house looking after him, but as evening came, it was time for her to head home. At around 8 p.m., she called her father to let him know she was about to leave Wayne's house. The drive home should have taken no more than an hour, but as the night came on, Kara still hadn't arrived. Her father was worried and made several attempts to reach her by phone, but there was no answer. Initially, he thought she might have stayed longer than planned at Wayne's, but when he called him, Wayne assured him that Kara had left after their conversation. Time passed, and Kara's disappearance was very unusual. After several more hours without word from Kara, her parents decided to take matters into their own hands and search for her. They split up, with her father taking one route and her mother another, trying to retrace her daughter's steps along the roads Kara would have traveled. Her older siblings joined the search, combing through the area all through the night. By the morning of December 28th, the family had found nothing. They were scared and desperate, and Kara's father, feeling that they needed more help, finally, they went to the police. However, they refused to take a missing persons report, saying the fact that Kara was 20 years old, and technically, she was considered an adult. The police told him that they had to wait at least 24 hours before filing a missing persons report. With no time to lose, Kara's family continued their search on their own. Hours later, one of Kara's sisters, along with her husband, took a back road and made a shocking discovery. They spotted a white Volkswagen Beetle parked off the highway. The car's doors were open, the windows were down, and a handbag was lying on the seat. The keys were still in the ignition, but Kara was nowhere around. They immediately contacted the rest of the family and the police. The authorities arrived soon after, and detectives began to investigate the scene. While some officers examined the car, others searched the surrounding area for signs of Kara. It wasn't long before one officer noticed something suspicious near an old bridge. As he approached, he spotted a body lying in the bushes beneath the bridge. The family was called to the scene, and unfortunately, they were the ones to identify the body as Kara's. The hope that Kara might still be alive disappeared. The circumstances of her death were as mysterious as her disappearance. An autopsy revealed that Kara had been struck on the head multiple times and strangled. There were no signs of sexual assault, and nothing appeared to have been stolen from her, including her wallet and personal belongings. which made the motive for her murder far more puzzling. No fingerprints were found at the scene and no other substantial evidence was uncovered. The investigation into Kara's death was slow and frustrating. Detectives tried to piece together the events of the evening leading up to her death. They confirmed that Kara had left Wayne's house around 8:30 p.m. A receipt found in her car showed that she had stopped at a gas station not far from the location where her body would later be discovered. Why had she turned off the main highway onto an isolated road, and why had she stopped at that particular bridge? What had happened during that time? The first person to come under suspicion was Kara's boyfriend, Wayne. After all, he was the last person to see her. But Wayne maintained that he had been home by the time Kara's family began searching for her. His alibi that night was verified by his sister, who confirmed that he had been with her when the search for Kara started. The police then turned to another possible suspect, Svein, the owner of the health food store where Kara worked part-time. Svein was known to be flirty, frequently trying to strike up conversations with young women, including Kara. But there was no direct evidence linking him to Kara's death. His behavior at Kara's funeral, however, struck detectives as unusual. He seemed overly upset for someone who wasn't even a close relative. Statement came in from a witness who claimed to have seen a gold-colored Cadillac with a blonde woman in the front seat near the area where Kara's car was found. The Cadillac was registered to Svein. When police questioned Svein, he denied any involvement in Kara's death. An investigation into his alibi placed him far from the scene at the time of the murder. Though the Cadillac and the suspicious behavior were strange, there was no concrete evidence to accuse him. With no clear suspects, the case went cold. The police began to ask the public for help. The media picked up the story and the case was in all news reports. During one of the broadcasts, a police officer appeared on television to talk about road safety. After the program finished, the police received over 300 tips from people who had witnessed strange behavior on the highway near where Kara's body had been found. Several women came forward to report that a patrol officer, later identified as Craig, had stopped them on that same road. According to these women, he had engaged in inappropriate, sometimes vulgar conversations with them. Some claimed he asked personal and intimate questions, and a few said he even touched them inappropriately. They also remembered that the officer had directed them to the same isolated road where Kara's car had been found. This new information raised red flags for the detectives. Craig, a 38-year-old Vietnam War veteran, had been with the police force for 13 years and had a reputation as a skilled and respected officer. His record seemed spotless. But when detectives dug deeper, they discovered a history of complaints from women who claimed he had stopped them for no reason and behaved inappropriately. These complaints had never been reviewed by his superiors, likely due to his remarkable reputation. The evidence against Craig began to rise. He had been interviewed for a segment about road safety just days after Kara's murder. In the interview, all viewers could see fresh scratches on Craig's face. He claimed that he had slipped while putting his patrol car with gas and had fallen into a barbed wire fence. However, the explanation seemed weird. Further investigation revealed gaps in his patrol logs for the night of Kara's murder. One entry had been erased and changed to reflect a different time, 9:30 p.m., the exact window of time when Kara's murder happened. This led the detectives to believe that Craig did it for his records to create an alibi for himself. Eventually, the detectives decided to search Craig's patrol car. They found that the tire tracks on the abandoned bridge matched those of Craig's vehicle. They also discovered a piece of rope in the trunk, which could have been used to strangle Kara. DNA tests on the rope later confirmed that it was likely the murder weapon. The evidence was overwhelming, but Craig continued to deny any involvement in Kara's death. He claimed he had been miles away from the crime scene at the time of the murder, issuing a ticket to another driver. but the driver later came forward, confirming that Craig had issued the ticket much later, not at the time of the murder. Even more troubling were the accounts from several of Craig's colleagues. They reported that Craig had shown an unusual interest in Kara's case, repeatedly asking for updates and even suggesting that the killer might not be entirely to blame, as if he were trying to deflect suspicion from himself. In January 1987, after all the evidence came together, the police arrested Craig. At trial, his defense team tried to downplay the circumstantial evidence, citing Craig's long history of service and impeccable reputation. But the prosecution argued that the evidence was irrefutable. Craig had falsified his patrol logs, lied about his injuries, and had a pattern of inappropriate behavior toward women. On May 15, 1988, Craig was convicted of first-degree murder. The jury found that he had deliberately planned and executed the murder of Kara, taking advantage of his position as a law enforcement officer to take her into a vulnerable situation. Kara's family, devastated by her loss, found a sense of justice when the conviction was handed down. But they also expressed frustration that the signs had been there all along, and yet it had taken so long for the truth to open. Craig was sentenced to life in prison, but he maintained his innocence until the very end. Kara's family, meanwhile, found a peace in knowing that her killer would never hurt anyone else again. Kara's story became a story about the dangers of blind trust and how those who hold power can sometimes be the very ones who betray it. Her memory continues to live on in the hearts of her family, friends, and the community who never forgot her tragic end. Thank you for watching.